Probably not, because he's only been around since about 63. So maybe some of you didn't meet him. But not only has he been around since then, I don't know when you were born in, and I'm not going to ask, but not only does he come around now as this agency's, what are you?
The director.
The director. But he has been a banker, the mayor of GBAHS for what, like 7 years? 8? 8 years. And then he was on the school board. There just isn't anything that he hasn't done. And we are so glad to have him here doing this with us. And thank you so much, Ed. I present to you Ed Gray III.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. When Betty asked me several months ago to be on the calendar for this, I was excited. It forced me to do some updating of some slides and come up with a presentation hopefully you'll find interesting. It has been just a wonderful life experience living in GBAHS. As all of you are aware, there's very few places you can call as good as this, whether it's to raise kids, enjoy your grandchildren, or simply retire and have paradise. And it's been wonderful since we moved here in 1963. Obviously a lot of changes since then, but most of them positive, and we've really enjoyed being a part of this community. I actually have my brother and sister that live here still. My parents have passed away, but we all grew up here and enjoyed calling GBAHS home. The agencies. When I was mayor, the year was 1985, the city was approached by a group of investment bankers that deal with stocks, bonds, securities. And they proposed to the city that we sponsor a loan program that was specifically for cities, counties, other municipal agencies to borrow from, principally in Florida. And at that time, it was felt that if we could produce a program that made borrowing for cities and counties less expensive than them going out and floating their own debt issue and doing something independent, because we were going to have a pooled program, that it probably could do well. The only risk to the city was that we would spend a lot of time on it, city staff, the council, and possibly it not make it, not be marketable. But there was never any financial risk to the city. Any borrower or any investor in these bonds knew that there was no pledging of assets or any other funding sources of the city for the program. It was strictly borrowers that would borrow out of it, and they had to pay it back. So the bondholders knew the risk, and the city had no financial risk. We just might spend a lot of time and it not prove out. Well, fortunately, it did prove out. And that's what I'd like to talk a little bit more about and tell you how later on other activities came about from this original program. So, that original program that was later run by GBAHS Financial Services, which is simply a department of the city, we did that program totaling $500 million. Now, that's a lot of money today. Back in 1985, it was a whole lot of money. And so that original program got kicked off in December of 1985. Since that time, we've done 95 different loans totaling $786 million out of the program. And the way we were able to take $500 million and create $786 million worth of loans, it was a revolving program. As some cities borrowed from it early and paid back money, we could reloan it. And that kept the program alive. As we went around the state of Florida and had success with it, we realized, though, that the program was going to mature. In fact, it matures in about another 2 years. It actually, by design, all the bonds mature, and so that program will no longer exist. So then, in 1999, we saw a market need for another agency, the Capital Trust Agency. And that was created by bringing together the city of GBAHS and, of all places, the town of Century. And we did what the Florida law would allow, which is create an agency by what's called interlocal agreement. That's simply an agreement between two entities, two governmental entities, that would pass some of their powers to the Capital Trust Agency, and in this case, the power to loan money. Since we did that activity and formed the Capital Trust Agency in 1999, we have issued over $2 billion worth of bonds to the Capital Trust Agency. Currently, in addition to the $2 billion we've already issued since '99, we've got about, well, that figure of $380 million was, as of 2 days ago, I got an application coming, I was told today, for another $200 million. So that'll go up another $200 million that's in the pipeline just in the next couple of days. So it is a dynamic and vibrant program, and we're real proud of the success that CTA has had. The other unique thing about Capital Trust Agency, we can actually do financings outside the state. And we have done some of those. We've financed some properties in Texas, South Carolina, and hope to do other states as time goes forward. Now, what is the Capital Trust Agency? In the municipal bond world, we are a conduit issuer, and that is simply a governmental entity. And remember, GBAHS and Century created the governmental entity, Capital Trust, that is able to act as a sponsor for a bond issue in order for those bonds to be tax exempt. Tax exempt bonds can only be issued by a municipal entity. And the tax exempt status is what makes the bonds attractive not only to investors, but also to persons or entities that need a project financed. Because typically, financing with tax exempt bonds is less expensive than conventional debt. So by having the tax exempt bonds issued, that's an allowable use for cash to be generated, and the proceeds of that cash or the bond issue put toward the project. Examples of projects that we typically see, and by the way, the Capital Trust Agency primarily is in the sector of private entities such as nonprofits, for-profits that qualify for tax-exempt projects to be financed, and those type of activities called private activity bond activity that are not necessarily the governmental sector. And an example of some of the things we've done are airport facilities, senior living facilities, sewage plants, educational facilities. These are examples of how these type of bonds can be put to work for the private sector. We have really been concentrating over the past year quite a bit in public charter schools, assisted living facilities, and a multifamily complexes around the state. In the charter school arena, we do not do anything other than publicly chartered schools. If a county such as Brevard County, where we've done quite a few lately, has chartered schools that need to expand their campus and can do so through going to the bond market, that we've been the conduit issuer to help them do that. These are some of the schools that we did just in the past year. There are schools that are located in places like Charlotte County, Jacksonville, Brevard County, St. Johns County, Vieira, Florida, which is also Brevard County, and Ocoee. And these charter schools are typically schools that were started by primarily parents and other community leaders that saw a need to be filled with a niche school. Some of these have special curriculums. And through that niche school, they've had at least 2 or 3 years of good operations. And now they're ready to either buy the building they're in or expand into another building and they need financing to do that. So we provide the means for these schools to build or expand their school plant. These are some of the ones that we've done. The Renaissance Charter School up there is in Jacksonville, and the twin facilities in Ocoee, which is just outside of Orlando. The one on the right, Vieira Charter School, really nice facility. They had been leasing the building, and so they wanted to use Capital Trust Agency to finance them buying the building, which lowered their cost of their lease payments and helped them in their pursuit of being a permanent facility. If you look on the left there, which is the school playground of the Renaissance School, that nice carpet grass out there is artificial grass, which was kind of interesting to see them put that in, but they found that an artificial grass, artificial turf, is certainly less maintenance and works well for their playground. So that was a little different twist we saw there. The Babcock Neighborhood School is in a development called Babcock Ranch, Florida. It's in Charlotte County. This is actually their temporary building that you see in the right-hand corner. That's what they're using as, there's going to be a future retail area, but the construction site for the new school that we financed is just a few blocks away. It's going to be about 9 acres. They're going to build additional classrooms, and this little school is very environmental oriented. The Babcock Ranch development actually is powered by a solar farm that's about, I think, 300,000 solar panels, and it powers the entire neighborhood, including the school. So there's a lot being taught in terms of the sciences and environmental positives in the Babcock community, and this little school is doing quite well. Another example of what we've done is Silver Creek Retirement Home, a senior living community. It was a financing of over $29 million. As you can see from the dining facility there and the streetscape, that's a very nice upscale facility, and anyone that is eligible to be in a senior living facility in that area, which is in the St. Augustine area, would take advantage of this and enjoy it.
And you're standing in front of it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thanks for telling me that. We'll see that one again since I was blocking it. But Silver Creek was the one that we did in St. Augustine, and it was our first project to do in St. Johns County. And by the way, with this job, if you don't think I haven't learned a lot about the geography of Florida, it's been interesting, because every time we do a project anywhere in the state, it's my practice, it's my old banker's practice of I got to walk the dirt and see it before we close on it. And I've really enjoyed visiting throughout the state. There's a senior living facility in Sarasota called Aviva. It's actually one that's been there for 2 or 3 decades, and we did a refunding of their debt to alleviate their debt service and provide more bottom line cash for that facility. And then the one on the right-hand side, the Fountains of Hope, is also a brand new one. It's built in the area of Northport, which is a community in Sarasota County. It's now open and it's doing well. In the affordable housing area, this happens to be a project in Opelika, Florida. Primarily low-income families that live there, but this was a complete rebuild and rehabilitation of a facility. What you see on the right-hand side is actually the new laundry room facility and meeting room facility. You see the plugs in the floor in the lower right-hand picture. That's going to be the plugs for a computer learning center for the families that live there. And the laundromat there is up to date, where you have the prepaid cards to use in it and all that type of thing that's up to date. And every unit in there was completely redone, furnished, and I can tell you from walking through there, I would have no problem living there. They just were well done. And so with $24 million worth of bond issuance, we helped them rehab that facility, or those apartments. These are some more apartments, happen to be in Texas. One of the nonprofits that asked us to finance their portfolio included Texas properties and Florida properties, and we did those under one umbrella. The left-hand corner, One Heather Glen, is a nice complex in Fort Walton. We actually closed on it last year, and it was the acquisition of that project by a nonprofit to operate it for moderate income families. This one I hope you can read okay. What this is showing you in terms of the impact of the city is how the earnings of the agencies have helped to keep cash available for the needs of the city, and particularly to keep property taxes as low as we can. If you look at, I should have a pointer here. Center column that says city property taxes. Those are the actual property tax revenues of the city for those years. If you look to the left, $1 million, $825, those were the transfers from the agencies to the city's general fund to help the city with its operations. And you can see how in some years, it's almost as much as the property taxes the city takes in. I can tell you in the early years of the program, when the tax base of the city was much lower, these programs were taking in more money than we were taking in property taxes. So what you can take away from this is if the programs weren't doing well, we probably would have double the property taxes we have today in the city. So it served us well in terms of a revenue source. It's an administration that you have to stay on top of. It's like any other business. You have to do it right in order for people to come back to you and do borrowings. And so far we've been successful with that. But that is the financial impact. And then also in terms of building the cash for the city, always having liquidity and a cash reserve, that's what you see in the far right-hand column. Those totals, some $14 million, are how much in cash the agencies have today that would be reserves and backdrop for the city. And that's it. Now, I know I probably threw quite a bit at you that maybe you're not real used to seeing, but I sure would enjoy any questions you have and do my best to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any other local projects other than the one in Fort Walton Beach?
The 85 program, the original one I told you about, it financed the South Palafox Marina, where you have Jocko's, all that area down there. City of Pensacola borrowed from us to do that. We also have done some borrowings for the ECUA in Pensacola for some of their utility needs. Not this portion of the rec center, but the original portion of the rec center. When we got the program off the ground, it was time to build the rec center, and the city actually borrowed from its own program to build the original rec center. And with the earnings from the program, we quickly paid off the loan. But right here, where you're sitting, about 200 feet that way, where the old building is, it was financed from this program.
You mentioned that the Gulf Breeze Financial Services bonds will expire or mature in 2020. What about the bonds that are issued through the CTA?
CTA bonds are continuing programs for individual borrowings that have maturities that go out as much as 30, 35, 40 years. That should be a sustaining source of income for the city. Because when we issue bonds, we not only get a fee for origination up front, but we get an ongoing annual fee. And that's been the goal, is as the 85 program pays down and goes away and becomes non-producing, we build up capital trust agency to offset that.
Has the City of Century seen these kind of increases as well?
Yes. Whenever we do a financing, we participate in the origination fees by sharing that with the City of Century, and they get benefit from this too. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, sir.
Your administration of this program, what does that run? What percentage of the money that's taken in goes to administration?
Approximately 30% of what we take in goes to administration. My salary is $150,000 a year to administer the programs, with the possibility of earning that much again if we exceed budget and if we have a successful year. So my contract includes a base salary and an incentive, but the incentive doesn't pay off unless we've had success. Yes?
Could you explain the history of how Gulf Breeze and Century became partners?
Our current mayor, Denheiser, at the time happened to be city attorney for both cities. When he was practicing in those early years of forming the agency, he served as Century's city attorney as well as GBAHS. And when we came up with the idea to create the Capital Trust Agency, we thought, well, who would be a good partner to create the interlocal agreement? And the suggestion was Century. Number one, we had a contact with Century because of his working with them. Number two, we wanted a partner that could really make use of the money and could really reap the benefits of sharing in the revenues, and what, of course, Century can. It really struggles with some of its needs up there.
Do you have any idea if there? I think I saw a long time ago a marina plan near where the hotels are. Is there a marina plan for Gulf Breeze in the future?
Not that I know what you're talking about. The long-range plan, I think there was a pictorial or depiction of the possibility of someone being there, but that was before the bridge was coming in. I have a feeling the bridge, where it's landing now, may have put that maybe out of reach, maybe not feasible. Then again, you never know. Once the bridge is completed and that area kind of settles down and maybe redevelopment takes place, then a marina could happen. But there are two issues with marinas, and I know a little bit about them because my father was in the oil business and used to serve marinas with gasoline products. And he used to always say, number one, a marina cannot depend upon fuel sales alone. You have to have other revenue means because it's tough to make it work. And the principal other means of making revenue in a marina is having several slips. Well, that area is just limited on how many slips you can have. It's just not enough space there for a lot of slips, particularly dry storage. Dry storage, of course, is a big money maker because you've got a concentration of storage. So that's one downfall. And the other is, even though it's somewhat protected there, you get some north and northwest winds coming in, and it's not quiet water. And so that really hurts a marina being able to operate successfully because you've got to have the quiet water. Yes?
Going back to the CTA,
Mhm.
Capital Trust and Gulf Financial Services, Gulf Breeze Financial Services. Have you had defaults?
We have. There is a not favorite, but it is a established fact in the banking business. If you don't have a loan go bad, you're not making any loans. And we have had one or two of the hundreds that we've done through these programs go bad. But when that did happen, the assets were liquidated. The bondholders did not lose much money. In fact, one case, we've had two. In one case, they lost nothing. It was the very early stages of the project, and they were made whole. The other one, they probably lost. Matt, no. When he took the mayor's job, he had to resign and rid himself of any conflicts involving being compensated. So he is no longer attorney for the agency.
Who is the attorney?
Mike Stebbins. He was attorney for city and CTA, and he's going to remain attorney for CTA. Yes, sir.
On transportation, has there been any financing of any mass transit facility, either within Florida or any of the other states?
For the fairly controversial high-speed rail system they're talking about between Miami and Orlando, you may have seen some press on that. It's been in the news for the last few years. We were actually called and asked if we would consider doing that. And we, at the time, said we would certainly talk about it. In the meantime, they found another issuer they preferred to use and did not come through us. So that's the only one we've had inquiry on as far as mass transit or high-speed rail. The other transportation-related facilities we've done have been some airport improvements, which included cargo handling warehouses. The FedEx or UPS facility at the Pensacola Airport, we financed that many years ago for Pensacola. Same is true with some at Orlando Airport, Fort Lauderdale Airport, Miami Airport. Big, large cargo handling facilities through these private entities that do those came to us to finance them, and we did finance a lot of them around the state. Another notable one, you've all seen it, I'm sure. if you all walk through the Orlando airport on the way to the baggage area, and if you're coming from the Delta gates, you walk through the big atrium of the Hyatt Hotel. Gulf Breeze financed the Hyatt Hotel at that airport. The Orlando Aviation Authority came to us, and they needed the means to finance something like that in a private activity manner. And I won't get into all the rules about that, but we had the funds that you could use for that, and we financed that Hyatt Hotel in the Orlando airport.
Is this opportunity available still to other municipalities?
That really is a question having to do with why not other cities. And the answer is, number one, when we were approached, we were a small city, fortunately with a council that could grasp the concept and also understand minimal risk. And for us, earning in those days $500,000 or $600,000 a year was big money for the budget of Gulf Breeze. Again, what we were risking was putting a lot of effort and time into it. I can't tell you how many times back in those days I made trips to New York City, because back then you weren't doing emails, you weren't doing conference calls, you had to go meet in person with all these bankers and banks. And back then the banks you did business with were the Japanese banks. So I was going to New York City at least every other month when we were trying to put this together. So to put forth the time and effort for what was us big money, $500,000 at the time we were going to get from the program, was worth it for Gulf Breeze. Because back in those days, our property tax take was maybe $300,000 a year. So here was a program that was going to almost double what we were taking in taxes, and enabled us to lower taxes. So it was worth it to us. Now for a Pensacola, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, that kind of money is just not worth them putting the effort into it with all the time that it takes and putting an emphasis on the activity in the enterprise. So that's what I would tell you is my reasoning why others haven't done it. They just didn't want to put the effort into it.
Could they still do it, or is that window closed?
For the 85 program, which was a pre-Tax Act of 86 program that enabled us to do a lot of things you can't do anymore, that's gone. That's one of the reasons the 85 program is maturing out, because the tax advantages are no longer. For what the Capital Trust Agency does, yes, that could be ongoing. That's an enterprise that someone could get going with, but you have to have the reputation. We don't have to market the Capital Trust Agency. I get telephone calls 2 or 3 times a week. Here's a financing, would you consider doing it? It's word of mouth, it's the legal community, it's the investment banking community. We've been around long enough, been successful enough, they call us, which is nice. To get that going from scratch again would be tough. Go ahead.
I just have, we had seen some pictures of what looked like oil exploring things in the bay from a long time ago. Can you just tell me, since you said your dad had something to do with oil, has there been any oil in the bay area?
The old business my dad was in was a distributorship where he distributed products at Union 76, if you remember that brand, Citco, Phillips 66. They would bring their product in through the terminal and then be distributed. As far as any oil activities in Pensacola Bay, I remember someone talking about wanting to do that, but I don't think it ever happened. What I recall over the years. Well, I've enjoyed it, and thank you for your questions. That's definitely exhilarating. I was hoping that we'd have some discussion, and happy to answer any more if you come up with some.
Thank you so much.